Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Live Ultralight podcast powered by Outdoor Vitals. This podcast is about inspiring you to get outdoors, showing you how to lighten your pack and build your confidence so that you can live a life full of adventure. Today, we have a very special guest, which I'm going to do an introduction on right now. His name is Ray Zahab. He's a Canadian explorer, long-distance runner, author, speaker, and founder of a nonprofit organization, Impossible to Possible. In 2015, he was awarded the Meritorious Service Cross, a decoration awarded to those who have demonstrated an outstanding level of service or set an exemplary standard of achievement to benefit or honor Canada. In 2009, Ray was a part of a trio that broke the world speed record for an unsupported expedition to the geographic South Pole. He was the first to run across the Atacama Desert, the driest desert in the world, and famously in 2007, he was a part of an ultra running trio that crossed the Sahara Desert in 111 days, as documented in the film Running the Sahara. His accomplishments are many, and the list goes on and on. According to his website, he's journeyed over 17,000 kilometers, and for those of you in the US, over 10,500 miles on his expeditions around the world. Clearly, Ray likes to push the limits, and we're very honored to have you on here, Ray. I'm really excited to have you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for that intro. I mean, that was like pretty accurate, I got to say. I mean, the only thing I'm starting to push the 10,000 mile. I got to update that, I suppose, at some point. But I'm starting to get a little bit more up there in the mileage. But it's so great to be here with you. And I've been following you on social media and enjoying all your posts, and that's been absolutely fantastic. So to actually get to talk to you is a lot of fun. So I'm stoked.
Well, the pleasure's mine. And I mean, I don't think that mileage, I don't know if it does or doesn't, probably doesn't even include the training that you do every day as well, right?
Oh, God, no. That's just extra. And you know what?
That'll probably be like 4 times as much.
No, you know what? It only includes certain expeditions. I don't even have all of my trips in that number. I don't even know why you know what? It was a random thing that my daughters asked me one day. You know, Daddy, how far have you ran on your expeditions? And I said, well, there was this, there was that. And by the time I added it up, like I was around 17. But I got to tell you, I'm sure it's well over 20,000 kilometers. Wow. I got to someday, you know what? I'm going to do that this weekend. I'm going to sit down and add up every single kilometer this weekend. So if you see me update my Instagram thing, you're going to know it's because of your, inspiration that I updated it. So there you go.
Well, I've got a new goal for you then. Just Googled it. It says that it's about 24,901 miles to go around the world. So that's a threshold you can aim for here in the near future.
Yeah, exactly. You want to know something? People have ran around the world. I mean, that's an amazing thought, right? I mean, it's happened. People have done it, and through history. So, in exploration history. So I find that there was like ran, walked, whatever. It's pretty neat. But so you just completed your first ultra, which is amazing, right?
Yeah, I'm like a very early on runner, I guess you could say. I started running about a year and a half ago. Previously, I had never ran. I mean, I was in football, I played on the line. In high school and college, I threw track. I was a thrower in track, and so I was the opposite of a runner. And I'm pretty sure I had only really ran about a mile at a time through my whole life until about a year and a half ago. So I still have a ton to learn, and I probably got the worst genetics and body size for this to run. So when I see the stuff that you do, it's like I can't even equate. But I think that's what I've loved actually about getting into some of this running aspect is I draw a lot of inspiration from guys like you that go out and do these just incredibly hard things. In fact, we were on a hike, it was a 110-mile hike through the Uintas, and I just had one of those low points where my stomach was really upset. I was really low on calories and a little low on hydration, and we had to climb this big pass. And I just kind of tucked in behind someone in our group, and I just thought about guys like you. And I just drew a lot of strength from that. I'm like, those guys push themselves so hard. I can't even begin to complain right now. Like, just push, right? And I find a lot of inspiration in the stuff that you do. I mean, in that intro, we named just a fraction, like you already alluded to, of the stuff that you've done in your past. And I think a very interesting starting point is that I read in your backstory that you used to smoke a pack a day and didn't consider yourself healthy at all. And I mean, what changed you to go from maybe that lifestyle to this crazy fit, active lifestyle that you live now, doing all these expeditions around the world?
Well, you know what? It's a good question. And, I had a similar conversation with someone earlier today, a friend of mine. And I said, you really don't know you feel like shit until you actually feel good one day, or you experience what feeling good can feel like. And then you realize, wow, I felt shitty for a really long time, right? And these things become very relative as well. I want to back up just before I get into this and say, when you're on that hike that you were on and you're burying yourself and you're giving it everything you've got, the most challenging things, I've said this many times before, the most challenging things we do are very relative to us as individuals. And so, like, when we do extraordinary things in our lives or exceptional things in our lives, it really comes down to how we're feeling in the moment. Like, people have asked me a million times, what was it like? Like, what did you feel like when you reached the edge of the Red Sea after 4,500 miles and 111 days of running across the Sahara? And I always say, you know what? It was exactly the same as my first basically 5-mile run that I was able to do around my neighborhood where I live in Quebec. I was able to run 5 miles and not take a walking break when I was doing my early running training. And I remember that day and how empowering that felt. And finishing the Sahara really truthfully felt about the same. It felt like those same emotions. So it's just relative different touch points throughout my own career or through whatever anyone else is doing. But to go back to the question, yeah, I was smoking a pack a day. I mean, drinking way too much, living a lifestyle that now, obviously I look back and I'm like, oh my God. But when I was younger, I had a lot of fun doing it. It's just that I was a mess, right? And I didn't really, I think deep down inside, I didn't really believe in myself or that I could do things. And so instead I did these other things that I knew I was good at, like partying and whatever else. But I had a great childhood. I lived on a small farm, and we had horses and dogs and rabbits and all sorts of things. And my brother and I were outside all the time when we were younger. And you move around on your feet when you're living in the country, because the nearest kids are 25 acres away across a hayfield. Your nearest friends to play with. So you'd run over there, but you never think about it, right? And then, you end up in high school and I sort of fell through the cracks there, and then, barely got out of high school, did not complete my community college courses. And I just felt that I really had no passion and no direction in my life. And my brother had transitioned his life in his late 20s to become this guy who was a trainer. He was like a personal trainer to people, but a very specific kind of personal training. Like, when you were on the line in football, if you had a shoulder injury, you would go and see him to rehab that shoulder. Like, he was doing really cool stuff. And not only that, he became a mountain biker, a climber, paddler. He was doing it all. And I was so inspired by him and how he was achieving goals and doing cool things. I thought, well, maybe if I did the things he did, my life would be different. That's how it started. I just wanted a different path in my life. And it would take me literally like 3 years to commit to, quitting smoking and cleaning up my life and blah, blah, blah. So by the age of 30, I was cooking, and I was climbing with my brother. I was in the mountains. I was living a life that was 180-degree change from where I was before. I was learning that I had this giant engine like my brother did to do these things that I would have never thought possible before. I was racing my mountain bike, and I became very serious about mountain bike racing. And then one thing led to another, from mountain bike racing, adventure racing, and climbing. And then I discovered ultra running. And that is, I guess you would say, is sort of the rest is history, as they say, that just sort of, that started it for me. My very first running race was a 100-miler in the Yukon. I never ran.
Very first is like your first ever
running race. Like first ever running race on my 2 feet. And I'd done adventure races like Eco Challenge qualifiers and Raid the North and all these things. So I was used to being awake for 5 or 6 days doing it. So I was in really good shape from mountain bike racing. But running was a completely different thing, but I didn't think of it that way. I was like, what the hell? I read this article in a magazine about these people who were doing this crazy thing, running 100 miles. Maybe I could try and do that. And so I trained as best I could with buddies of mine that helped me to start running. I did that 5-mile run that I told you about. And a few months later, I showed up at the Yukon Arctic Ultra. And not only did I finish it, but I won it. And I thought, this is what I think I want to do with the rest of my life. Like, I'm not the guy that's supposed to win. I'm not the guy that's supposed to be able to finish this. But I did it, and I had no idea how I did it. And it was just so crazy. So I started going around the world, doing ultra marathons all over the place.
Whoa. Blah, blah. I want to slow you down here, because that, like, how did you do it? Right. I mean, I'm sure you've pondered on that since, right? You went from like couch to ultra marathon winner, basically, is how it kind of sounds. And I don't know how long that process was, but I mean, in your mind, as you reflect backwards at that specific event, what do you think made the difference? What was it? Just like you had some ability to push harder and farther? Was there some strategy? Was there some biological factors? You feel like you're just good at this? I mean, I'm sure you've thought back and been like, how did that happen? Right.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I don't dwell too much into the past. Like, I don't go into the past too much. I mean, like, we're having a conversation about the past, so then I go into the past. But on my day-to-day life, I'm not really thinking. Forward. Yeah, I'm like sort of, well, now I'm thinking in the now and then thinking in the forward. And, to be honest with you, what was it? Well, have you ever heard the term ignorance is bliss? Well, I didn't really know what I was getting into. And that was the beauty of the time when I was 35 when that race happened. Right. And I was at a time in my life where I had become comfortable with who I was. And I was happy. I didn't have any money, but I was happy. I was racing mountain bikes. I had some killer mountain bikes that I was able, a local bike shop with the bike manufacturer was sponsoring me. I was training clients, personal training. I'd followed my brother's footsteps in his career. I was helping people that way, and spent a few years learning the skills to be able to do that. I mean, I was fulfilled in that sense. And truly, I believe this, that if you're able to look yourself in the mirror and say to yourself, you know what? I'm happy. I mean, what else? What the hell? I feel good today. I feel I'm happy. I'm satisfied. Then you won the lottery. Because I mean, at the end of the day in life, I mean, what is life, right? I mean, it's like, not to get too philosophical, but being happy is critical. If you're really happy in your life, then things are going okay. No matter about the money or anything else, it's just truly being genuinely happy. So at any rate, when I first entered that race, I had nothing to lose. So I was like, what the hell? Like, I'm reading this article in this magazine about these amazing people to me that are doing this amazing thing. How do they do it? I wanted to know. I just wanted to know. I was curious. And so I was like, I'm going to do this thing. And I had clarity in my mind that I was not going to finish. Like, I was certain of that. But I thought, I want to learn what it is that gives these people, like, what is it that they think? Why do they think that they're able to do this? I want to know what it is that they think. You know what I'm saying? Like, how do they get the confidence? So maybe if I do it, I'm going to understand it. And then, one thing led to another, and I made it to the end. And it was a longer process than what I'm telling you. Getting to the end, I mean, I almost quit at the halfway point. But, I came to realize at that halfway point that the things I was truly concerned about, like what others were going to think when I failed, like my friends, what were they going to say? Because all my friends told me, don't even go. Are you crazy? You're not a runner, right? And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to have to go home and tell them all they were right. And I realized none of that matters. Like, it really doesn't matter. It was about me. Like, I made that choice to go there and spend every dime that I had, which wasn't much, to get there. And I had to run that thing down as far as I could until I couldn't go anymore. And if I couldn't physically move anymore, then I would know the why of I was there, and how, and all the questions would be answered. And lo and behold, that focus and that drive got me from one tree to the next, to the middle of the night in the woods in the Yukon to the finish line. And I won the race, and I realized in that moment when I crossed that finish line and I was told that I won the race, because truth be told, when I crossed the finish line, for a moment, I thought that everybody had left. Like I thought I was the last one.
Really?
So when because there was only 45 people in this race, right? So you sort of like, in
you don't see very many people out on the course.
You see, like I saw like 2 people at the 40K mark. And then at one point in the night, I crashed for like 10 minutes, and your brain, when you're frozen, it's February in the Yukon, when you're frozen and you get up and you start going down the trail, you're like, well, that's the end of that. Everybody's passed me by now. You know what I mean? Like you're in a different headspace. So, what I learned was that human beings in general, not just me or you, but everybody, human beings in general underestimate what they're capable of physically, mentally, and emotionally. And I think that that's just something that's a reality. And I realized in that moment that I had exceeded those personal limits that I thought I had. And then that would lead me to ultra marathons around the world. As a matter of fact, if it wasn't for the Yukon, I would have never gone to Egypt, Morocco, all these different places to race in the Sahara Desert. And then I fell in love with the Sahara Desert. And that's how we ended up crossing the whole Sahara a few years later.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, yeah, I'm sure I'm sure your sanity has been questioned a lot, especially by probably those people that are close to you. Just like in the beginning of you signing up for that, I had a similar experience where just me signing up for the 70K in the mountains, like everyone I knew absolutely believed that was absolutely crazy. And I think when I was out on course running it, you inherently start to ask yourself, why? Like, why am I doing this? What is this about? And I kind of came up with this answer personally where it was like, I think I do this because I'm not good at it. And I just want to get better and learn and push myself. But I'm curious if in this race, you kind of had a similar experience where you're out there and you're just like, why am I doing it? You mentioned like at some point you kind of realized like, I need to get over what everyone else thinks about me finishing this and things like that. Do you think that you had any kind of moment like that in this race that, like you said, paved the way for, all of these expeditions to come?
Like, you mean did that race sort of set the tone, like for everything?
Like did you find like a why, or did you find something on course that like, that just kind of changed the way you viewed like your why for running it?
Well, you know what? I've often said that I did have an epiphany in that race, but the epiphany was more related to the decisions that I personally was making in my life. Like I made that decision to go there and do that. And, because I chose to go there and do that, it was on me. Whatever the outcome was, it was on me. And excuse me, since then, I did I don't know how many ultras after that. And then I ran across the Sahara. And I thought for sure in the Sahara, I wasn't going to make it. Like I was freaked out because we're in Senegal and you got this, big film crew and, Matt Damon's making a movie out of the 3 of us running across the Sahara. And I'm thinking, oh my God, like total imposter syndrome. Like I do not belong here with these 2 runners. And even though I've done really well in all these ultras that I was in, there's no, like I did the math in my head. The distance to the halfway point in the Sahara was further than I'd been probably on my feet in my life, kind of thing, right? Like, it just there was no way I was going to make it. There was just no way. Right. And I just thought, you know what? And I took the heat off myself and I thought, you know what? Go as far as you can. And when you drop out, just, it's real, dude. Like you're not going to make it. Well, we made it. All 3 of us made it together, obviously. And that, I would say, was more formulative in the expeditions that I'm doing now and have been doing. I've done 33 or 34 major expeditions since running the Sahara. I've done a lot of projects, right? That includes the youth expeditions with Impossible to Possible. I think what it did was it taught me that there's a way of going on to autopilot, that you just go and you do these things. And you don't necessarily, you plan like crazy, you prepare like crazy, you do everything you can to mitigate risk, but you remain humble in what you're doing, and you don't overblow it in your mind at the same time. It's a mix of things. It's a mix of things.
Yeah. I think, well, I wanted to ask you this. Were you more scared of dropping out, or were you more scared of Charlie in the film? getting mad at you.
No, you know what? I mean, you know, everybody
so for those of you that don't know, Running to Sahara is an amazing film. You really ought to watch it. Like Ray had said, it was, I believe, produced and it's commentated by Matt Damon, and it was a really great story. That's actually where, you know, I think we got turned on to you is with Joe, who does our video editing and podcast production. He had seen the film and he's like, dude, you got to talk to this guy. It's amazing. It's amazing. So then I watched the film and I was like, yeah, that, you know, anyways, that's kind of how we got onto it. But for those of you that haven't seen the film, you should definitely see it. And in the film, there's three people that are running it. One of them, which is Charlie. And he's more of the outspoken and the personality that kind of gets more intense as stress comes onto people's shoulders and his shoulders. It's great. It makes for a good dynamic. And that, I don't know, I guess, is that part of the show, or is that really his personality? Would be a good.
I mean, well, listen, here's the thing. When you're doing 40 miles a day for 111 days in the Sahara Desert, you got to remember that, like, you're looking at a film that's an hour and 43 minutes or whatever, or 45 minutes.
Yeah.
It's 111 days of, like, we literally had 2 showers the entire time we were out there. Right. You know, you're in sand dunes for 3 weeks. Like, all you wake up in the morning, 40 miles in the sand dunes. You wake up in the morning, 40 miles in the sand dunes. Like, mentally, it's exhausting. And, you know, everybody gets tired and grumpy and all that sort of thing. And that's all sort of part of the dynamic. But I got to tell you, I never have laughed. Charlie and I would start laughing about the stupidest stuff. And the worst injuries, people have asked me, what's the worst injuries you've had on expeditions? Like, I've almost died. I almost died in the Arctic one time on an expedition, breaking through some ice. But honestly, the 2 worst injuries I ever had was in running the Sahara. Charlie and I were laughing so hard about something stupid one day that I pulled an abdominal muscle and I could barely breathe for about 2 weeks. And then on the way to the South Pole, my buddy Kevin and I Kevin and I have done many expeditions, says that we have to be very careful that we don't laugh so hard that because we pulled muscles together in our ribs and in our abdominals in the South Pole and across Siberia. And it's so through humor, I've had my worst injuries on expeditions. But running the Sahara was kind of neat because you got to remember, look, that came out in 2007. So the iPhone 3, first iPhone, 2007. It was before social media was huge. I mean, it was a movie that was in theaters if you wanted to see it, right? And then it went over to iTunes or whatever, and all the rest of it, you could see it on your laptop. But then it was on HBO or something. But the point is it was one of the early running movies. Right? There was a couple that came before it. If you and your listeners want to see a really amazing movie, it's my favorite running movie besides Running the Sahara, obviously. And it's called Running on the Sun. It's called Running on the Sun, and it's a film about Badwater. And this thing was shot in probably 2000. And the characters that are in this film before ultra running was really a big thing is fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. I always say there's the pre-Marshall Ulrich days, like the pre-Marshall Ulrich, the pre-Dean Karnassus, the pre-Scott Jurek days. And then there's the post days, where ultra running was changed, forever. Yeah. But it became known because of those guys, right? And Lisa Smith and, other great pioneers of the sport. Some of the other names I'm drawing blanks on. Ann Trayson, amazing people that were doing incredible things. But it's neat because it's old, but you can still watch it, and the film is somewhat current in a lot of ways, So anyhow, yeah.
So if you're running though, like, because I think some of our listeners that are hikers and some are long distance hikers, right, doing the AT, PCT, those type of trails, they could probably relate a little bit into just like getting into that groove. You just get up, you do the same motions, you cover the distance, you end. But I think that everyone at some point kind of has to have that deeper reason why, right? Like, why are you doing this? And I think a part of it can be to just like go and push accomplish something that's never been accomplished before, right? That'd be a massive driving factor. But I think inherently inside of you have something deeper that's going to be driving you forward. And with you, I guess, do you like, what is it that you find yourself that just makes you continue to push forward day after day for 111 days in the heat and the wind and the exposure like that? Like, what are you getting at?
Well, I mean, truthfully, dude, it's a long answer. I mean, this is what I do professionally. I'm an explorer. That's my job. And from that job comes different things. Like there's avenues for me to take care of my family. I have 2 daughters that are athletes themselves. My wife,
who pays an explorer? Like who's your boss?
Well, yeah, but that's the point. You're in business for yourself. So you got to hustle, and you have sponsors that you're working with. But let me just tell you how my life works, and then it'll give it more and why I do what I do. When I finished running the Sahara, what was abundantly clear to me is that through an adventure, I had a voracious appetite to want to learn. So as we were running across the Sahara, I'm learning about the water crisis in North Africa. I'm learning about agriculture. I'm learning about economics. I'm learning about culture. I'm learning about geography, all these things because we were on an adventure. I'm learning from the people who live there so much about North Africa that I didn't know. And I thought, wow, like I never learned this much in school. So what is it about an adventure that is so educational? And when I decided that when I finished running the Sahara, that I didn't want to go back to doing races, that instead I wanted to continue doing these crazy expeditions and challenges that I was never really sure if I could finish because I love that unknown. So I love the unpredictability, but B, I would take these expeditions and I would connect them to schools all around the world based on the region that I'm in, talking about specific subjects. So I would bring content creators or I would create the content myself. And that became a primary focus for me on almost all of my expeditions, connecting them back in one way or another, whether through live website or social media, to students in schools who are following me. So that became a thing for me. But simultaneous to that, I started a foundation called Impossible to Possible, which is based in the United States and in Canada. And what we do with Impossible to Possible is we take young people 16 to 21 years of age on their own expeditions that are learning based all over the world. We've done 15 of these youth expeditions so far, ranging from Peruvian and Brazilian Amazon to Sahara Desert to Rajasthan to the Canadian Arctic to Bolivian Altiplano, etc. And they learn about a specific subject while in that region. And over the course of 6 days, an expedition conducted by 16-year-olds running, 13 miles a day, are also teaching 6 different modules about a subject like dinosaurs. That's what we studied in Utah. I told you before we got online here that we did the big one in Utah on the rise of the dinosaurs in that region. And our youth ambassadors are running to a dinosaur dig site with the University of Utah, and they're casting dinosaur bones live on satellite. And 20,000 kids in classrooms around the world are watching this. And it's a great way to learn. And so, long way around to answer your question, I do my expeditions. I am very grateful to be funded by companies that help me to be able to do the expeditions I do. But what I do is I combine the resources that I gain from my own expeditions, and I pool resources throughout a year, and I donate a percentage of the sponsorships that I raise, sometimes all of it, to be able to conduct an Impossible Possible youth expedition, because everything we do with Impossible Possible is 100% free. There's no cost for kids that go on the expeditions. We are all volunteers. And the volunteers that go on the youth expeditions, like the teachers and the content recorders and all this stuff, all of their expenses are paid, but they don't get paid. All monies are spent in the regions where we're doing the adventure. So I got these 2 things on the go, and they're intertwined completely, because if I do my expeditions, then I get funding for Impossible Possible. It's very important to me. But also I have a guiding company called Capic One, and we take people adults on expeditions, which are not free, but I guide people to amazing places on expeditions. And they go and they learn what it's like to be an Impossible Possible youth ambassador. They cross a remote part of the world, and it becomes a learning opportunity for them themselves. So everything's intertwined. So how do the bills get paid? I mean, it's just, you're always hustling,
Yeah. Yeah.
You're always
but and it seems like the big why behind it for you is that this world of adventure and learning is really what inspires you and is this why to go and do some of this, right?
Yeah, no, it's absolutely why. It's so to be clear for your listeners, and especially like the PCT people and the Appalachian Trail and all, when you're going unsupported, all of my Arctic expeditions are unsupported or self-contained for the most part. And I typically do Arctic expeditions in the middle of winter because I love the Arctic skies when the sun is just cresting the horizon, the snow, the ice, everything at its extreme and its most cold, and being able to share and immerse students in a place like that they never or may never get the opportunity to go and see physically themselves. But I go there and I'm standing in the middle of that spot and I'm able to share with them what it's like to be there, right? I mean, it's really a driving force for me. But at the end of the day, too, I'm excited about the adventure. I'd be lying if I said, well, I'm going and I'm doing it for this. But truthfully, I'm doing the adventure because I want to do the adventure. It's that the motivating factor for me while I'm on the adventure that I'm doing it, what really keeps me cranking and going is the fact that I've got 10,000, 20,000, whatever teammates in classrooms all over the world. Like that's huge for me. It just is. We all have our thing that gets us stoked when we're doing expeditions. And that's a big part of it for me is to be able to share the places in photo, video, maybe sometimes live satellite. When I'm on a desert expedition, I typically am supported. So I'll go 20 miles, get a resupply, 20 miles, get a resupply, et cetera. Try to do 50 miles, 40, 50 miles a day. And, on those trips, I'm able to bring photographer, videographer, so I can create really great content, Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask you about, some specifics of some of these, and how challenging some of these expeditions are. But while we're on the topic of impossible to possible, I find it very interesting to know why people donate and work with charities or start charities or nonprofits and all of this, and why they do the causes that they do it, right? So here at Outdoor Vitals, we donate 1% of revenue. And, so far we've donated, everything that we've donated so far has gone into clean water projects in Africa and Cambodia and these different areas. But I find that I want more fulfillment out of it, meaning it's one thing to write a check. It's another thing to have a more personal relationship with where those funds are going and feel and see the impact for yourself. I think that's what would make it more impactful for me as the guy who's writing these big checks, and so I find it very interesting, like how people get to it, because you are 100% passionate about this organization. Other people are 100% passionate about clean water projects. Other people are 100% passionate about fill in the blank, right? So I'm curious, I'd love to just hear if you've got a response to this of why all the things that you could do, Ray, all the things that you could impact this world and leave a legacy and help people, why impossible to possible?
Well, you know what? I was on the board of the Ryan's Well Foundation with my wife, working with projects in North Africa and different regions of Africa, building water projects. Matt Damon created H2O Africa, which was combined with water.org, and they raised a ton of dough through the Running the Sahara project for these areas. And you know what? When we did that project, I made lifelong friends in the Sahara, but and the water component was really important to me. But when sometimes, like when you eat a really good meal and you're like totally full and you're like, all right, I've had enough. Like now I know I've had enough. Right. But like if I sit down to like wings, I could just keep going forever and ever. And I'm never really satisfied. Right. But sometimes you have like a really good meal. And you're like, you know what? That's it. I'm out. I'm checking out. I've had enough to eat. Well, when I was meeting with my friends after the Running the Sahara project, and I was on the board of the Ryan's Well Foundation, I was volunteering with the One by One Foundation at the time and all that. And I was talking about this idea that I had where, wow, like I remember what it was like to be 16, 17. Like I remember clearly, I still remember what my view of the world was. And it wasn't totally accurate. Like it wasn't accurate by a long shot because why? I didn't have experiences. Now we have the capacity for experiences and we have technology to share those experiences. Like social media is a double-edged sword. In one way, it creates unrealistic expectations of people, like, you know, from people on what they're supposed to look like, feel like, how many likes they're getting, you know, all this jazz. But on the other end, you can have a friend in India, you can have a friend in Italy, you can have a friend anywhere in the world and be sharing, you know, your lives with that friend. So in a lot of ways, you know, it's a great thing too. So when I started Impossible Possible, we got the idea in 2007 going into 2008. And, you know, the technology, the satellite technology was improving. Our ability to communicate was improving. I had this idea that I wanted to take these kids on expeditions, as I had mentioned to you before. But it'd have to be free. We'd all be volunteers and we would do this crazy thing and we would create educational programs because going back to what I said before, I remember what it was like to have a world view. But let's take kids, regardless of where they come from, what their income is, whatever, as long as they have a voracious appetite to want to learn and they get picked by the selection committee. If I could take 100 kids, I would. I just don't have the budget to. And we'll put these teams together. And for the ones that don't get selected, they get to be part of it through their classroom portals and through social media or whatever, and learn about the world and learn about a subject while you're learning about the world and be inspired by your peers, you know? And so I knew when I started doing this, I had felt like I had the full meal, right? Like I was like, yeah, you know what? This is what I love doing. This is what I dig because it's right up my alley. Like I love being on an adventure, but even more, I love being on an adventure where I get to see other people, you know, take from it and learn from it and grow from it. And hey, I'll tell you something. That goes for the adult expeditions with Capic One too. Although Capic One is a for-profit business, it donates to Impossible to Possible. But nonetheless, what doesn't change with these adults is the same thing the youth ambassadors go through. It is a completely life-changing event. And I see people when they come on the adult expeditions, and they have a assumption of what it's going to be like. Most of these people are very experienced. Like I've had Everest climbers, I've had finishers of Marathon des Sables, Badwater, etc. And they come on our expeditions with an expectation of, because it's all endurance based in their mind. And then they do the expedition and they learn things and they bond with their teammates and they help others and they come out the other end and they're like, this is the greatest trip I've ever done. I've learned something from it. And so that process to me is fascinating. And, you know, like there's other ways it's very fulfilling. There's other ways that I give back. I mean, I volunteer in a lot of ways. There's some people that I coach. There's other things I do that nobody ever hears about. I speak at a ton of schools. And I get fulfillment from that also as part of my community, my adventure community. But, you know, my work with Impossible Possible, that's what I love doing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really fascinating for sure. And just listening to you talk about it, you can see the level of fulfillment and passion you have for that, which is incredible. I mean, it sounds like you're just doing amazing things. And I think when people do understand the why, they can endure the what. And what I mean by that is, I think when kids are out there seeing the why do I need to learn this and seeing it firsthand, it's going to change that whole experience for them, which is an incredible thing that you're definitely putting on. I think for me, sometimes I guess I feel like maybe I'm still searching just a little bit to figure out the best way. But I think I'd love to find what you've found with just that fulfillment, being able to see that. I think, like you mentioned with social media, a lot of times, you know, I'm working on a screen, right? I mean, we go out, we film content, we backpack and stuff, but other times you're just working a lot on a screen and you don't get that two-way communication. So we started a challenge this last year. It's called the 100-Mile Challenge, where we did a beta group of 100 people and just tried to get them to go and do a 100-mile hike. And it was very interesting. We learned a lot and it was really enjoyable. And I got so much personal purpose, I guess, from doing that, because it was more of that two-way street. And we're going to try to make it more so that way next year. That it was one of the more impactful things I've done in a long time, just to hear people pushing their limits, hitting their own goals. And it was pretty special and something I definitely want to build upon. But But let's switch gears here for a second, Ray. You've got to be someone who has almost more stories that you could tell than anyone out there. The amount of experiences you've probably had out there are just, I don't know. I'd like to even try to comprehend them. But in your opinion, what has been your hardest expedition?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and I've done some. People automatically assume it's got to be the Arctic stuff or the South Pole or something like that. To be honest with you, when we went across the Sahara, I was like, all right, nothing could possibly be this hard ever again. And the Sahara is still the longest thing I've done, right? Because there's only so many things you can do that are 4,500 miles long. Then when we went then I did a couple of smaller projects. Then I went to the South Pole, and I thought, okay, this was really hard, But then, when I went to the South Pole, when you go to the South Pole, when you go to Antarctica, you go November, December, January, right? And the sun is in the sky 24/7, right? So your tent eventually, if it's, it can be quite cold outside. But when you get inside your tent, it starts to get that greenhouse effect going, right? And so there's no polar bears up on there or anything like that. Then I started doing projects in the Canadian Arctic in winter. And when I started doing Canadian Arctic projects, then of course you're not sleeping at night because there's polar bears and you don't know if they're coming, and there's wolves and there's everything else out there, right? There's water. There's the chance of falling in a breaking ice. There is.
Do you just take bear spray for a polar bear, or do you have something special for them?
Don't do bear spray. Bear spray, we call that in the Arctic. We call that seasoning. Because it typically will blow back on you. Yeah. And then now you're even more tastier for the bear. The polar bear is like the apex hunter on the planet, right? It's like you just don't want to run into a polar bear. You just don't want to. And so I bring firearms. I do all the safety protocols that I can. You use a polar bear fence whenever possible. But I mean,
is that just an electric fence?
Well, no, it's a warning fence to scare the bear away and to wake you up if you're asleep. And then the cold of the Canadian Arctic is so extreme. So then it became the Canadian Arctic expeditions that were the most difficult thing. But looking back now, if I was to grade things out of all these expeditions, I think the hardest trip I did was in 2011 in the summer, middle of summer 2011. I ran the length of the Atacama, driest place on earth. I think you mentioned at the beginning. It was 800 miles.
I probably just butchered the name, but yeah.
No, it's good. 800 miles in like 19 days or whatever, 19, 20 days. And it was so difficult because the environment was so heinous, dude. It was like, there was more of you could probably verify this, but there was more of a hole in the ozone at that time. I actually think that it's improved over time. And look, I don't typically burn. I was burned to a complete crisp, even wearing SPF 50. I've had to wear long sleeves and gloves to protect my skin because it was, turning into blisters, like huge blisters. The heat was insane. It was Death Valley hot every day, and intense wind, and salt was in the wind all the time. There's like a fine little skiff of salt blowing off of the desert. It just was brutal, man. It was brutal. And I suffered. And I don't get blisters. I had blisters. And I mean, it sounds like it wouldn't be. And I had long resupplies. Really, so sometimes I'd be like 50K to a resupply. And so
running solo?
I would have to say, yeah, I was solo as well. And I would have to say that would probably be the most difficult. Now, I've done shorter expeditions. In 2020, I went solo from the island of Kikik-Tarjuak across the Arctic Ocean, across the open sea to Baffin Island, and then crossed Baffin Island and kept on going to the other side. And that was a shorter trip. It was like 5 days, but unsupported, self-contained with a sled with all my gear in it and everything. And dude, it was like minus 65 with the wind. Even my eyelids frosted through my goggles. It was so brutal for 4.5 days. But I mean, so I've done long things, short things, but those are these shorter ones are sometimes harder for the amount of time that you're out there. So I guess it's just a big mishmash, but I would say that Atacama was right up there, if not at the top.
And when you're going through that desert, like how much water are you drinking in a day? Are you measuring that? Are you like, how do you know how to stay hydrated?
Yeah, so I just did a west to east transect of Death Valley this past July, and we were like up over mountains through Death Valley itself. Everything, bushwhacking, a mix of everything. And we were resupplies 20 miles between resupplies, and we were drinking every 20 miles 8 liters.
8
so
liters.
We were carrying five, and drinking it all out, and then drinking another 3 sitting there, 2 to 3.
Wow. So,
it's a lot of water.
I feel like there's a pretty big misconception out there that, that you drink that much and you're going to flush your body, right? Like flush it of needed nutrients and stuff like that. I imagine that you're adding additives to your water, electrolytes, things like that.
Oh, tons of electrolytes. And don't forget a year of training and preparation. Like for this Death Valley transect, 6 months, I trained specifically. I was in the sauna every day. I have a sauna in my backyard, training it, sitting in there with my electrolyte, getting my electrolyte balance right, training myself. Where I live, it's very hot and humid in the summer. And, in the lead up in June, it was very hot and humid, putting in big miles, training my body to process fluids. Yeah.
Can you improve at that?
Train your body. Yeah.
Someone once told me that, like, I'm a huge sweater, right? So when I go do like a sweat test in like 70-degree temperatures in the middle of the day with a little bit of wind, I'll lose 2 liters of water in 1 hour of running. Right. And not even like pushing as absolute hard as I can, just like maybe a 7 or 8 out of 10, effort level. I'll lose 2 liters of water. And someone told me that I can't change that. Like my body will only get more efficient at cooling itself, even if I dropped, more weight and things like that, that's just biologically in me. When you're doing this kind of training, is that something that you can train, or are you just training your body how to be efficient with its own parameters?
There's the physiological answer, the science answer, right? Like the one you got. And then there's the answer of like the way I feel answer. And sometimes the way you feel, perceived exertion, the way you feel is just as important as the actual scientific answer. So I believe you can adapt over time to certain situations. The human body can adapt to just about anything. Like we laugh here because today I have to go in Celsius. Okay. So today it was 10 degrees Celsius when we woke up in the morning. It's unusually cool for this time of year. We're used to like 20 degrees Celsius. Now in the winter, it can get to minus 35, minus 40 where I live. If it was 10 degrees Celsius when it's normally minus 35 to minus 40, we'd be running around with our t-shirts and shorts. Dude, I went to the grocery store this morning with a down jacket on. So what happened? I adapted the other way. I adapted to heat, right? Yeah. In a very short period of time. So I do think the body does adapt. I think you just have to be really careful. You're not foolish about it, right?
Right. Yeah, that's super interesting. On some of these expeditions that you've been on, I'm sure you've had some pretty close calls. What do you feel like has been like the closest call to death that you've had on an expedition?
Well, I broke through some ice in the Canadian Arctic one year on an expedition. I made a mistake and I was overconfident in my ability to determine the thickness of this river I was on, and I broke through it. It's a much longer story that, we won't have time for it today, but suffice to say, like the punchline is I broke through this ice and I almost got washed underneath the ice, pulled underneath the ice by the current. I was able to get out of this hole after a few minutes. I mean, literally that was the closest I'd come. Wow. And I had a long way to go to get to safety. It's a long story, but I say it was the worst thing that ever happened to me, but it was also the best thing that ever happened to me because it gave me clarity in my life. Although I'd been on a path for quite some time with expeditions and doing the things that I'm doing, that experience gave me clarity of, what was important in my life, and that I was spending a lot of time, in friendships and whatnot. And I'm sure you have these friends in your life that, you do your best. You want to communicate with everybody and you're emailing everybody and you're emailing these friends. And it always seems like you're the one reaching out, right? And after a while, it's like, it only seems they're reaching out to you when they need something. And otherwise, like you're the one always asking, hey, how's your family doing, et cetera, et cetera. And so it wasn't like I came out of that ice and judged a bunch of people and said, okay, I'm no longer speaking to you. I just kind of let go. It was almost like I was, don't even know what the right word is, but there was like a
it's like a filter. Yeah.
Yeah. It just all of a sudden I was like, you know what? I'm cool with it. And instead of wasting 10 minutes writing those emails, I'll spend 10 more minutes with my daughters, and it was just very clear to me who in my life was critically important and who those people were that were so important to me in my life. And I bring them closer into my circle. And I think that it was really good for me to go through that. So.
Yeah, that's incredible. Well, I know we're getting towards the end here, so I'll quit asking these massive deep questions because I'd love to get deeper into these, and you're just a breadth of information. I gravitate towards people like you because you have so much really to share. But let me ask this, just two kind of closing things. What's in your future? What trips or what bucket list expeditions or things are you looking at next?
Well, I'm guiding a group in the Canadian Arctic in a few weeks for 10 days. So I'm really excited about that because they've been waiting since the pandemic, since the last 2 years to go on this trip. Likewise, with Impossible to Possible, we're going to be doing our first youth expedition since 2018 or 19 because of everything that was going on, right? So we're doing that next year. Very excited about that. And then I'm also guiding two groups of clients in the Atacama Desert in November, and stoked about that. And then I've got an Arctic project of my own that I'll be doing in January. No shortage of stuff on the go, like no shortage. Yeah. So
these guiding experiences that you put together, what level of people are you getting? Are you getting absolute beginners, or are you getting like seasoned backpackers to come on these with you?
It depends on the trips. Like I guided one right before the pandemic lockdown, like literally weeks before the lockdowns, and it was in Siberia on Lake Baikal in February. And that was for advanced experience, and that was a small group. I think we have 4 in that group. And so that's sort of, and then right on up to, Atacama, where, it's fully supported. So people are able to, get in the 4-wheel drive if they need to, if there's an issue, right? But it's intense. They're all intense.
Yeah.
Just different levels.
Sounds very fascinating. For those that want to know more about that, maybe just repeat a little bit slower this time the name of that guiding company.
So it's what the easiest thing is, because you're on Instagram, and I'm assuming this will be on. Just go to my Instagram page.
Okay.
Just my name, Ray Zahab, and direct message me, and I can give you more information.
Okay. And with that, is there any other things that you want to mention? Any, if people are interested in impossible to possible.
I would say, you know what? I would say with Impossible to Possible, just stay tuned. We will be making announcements in October on the location of the next youth expedition, details and stuff like that. And we'll start the process. There'll be an online application available for potential youth that are interested. All that's coming down the pipe. So stay tuned. And I guess that's about it.
Is Instagram the best place just to stay up to date with you and your life? I know that I think I saw you just doing a trip with your daughter just barely. And she looks like quite the runner, by the way.
Yeah, both my daughters. I have 2 daughters. Both are, and they both paddle. They sprint kayak and sprint canoe. I don't know how big of a thing that is down there, but it's a huge thing up here. So they race in sprint canoe, and then they cross country ski race in the winter. So they're right into doing stuff. But yeah, we were just away in the mountains in Quebec, not far from where we live, and not far in Canada. It's like a 7-hour drive. And so they're right into all this kind of stuff. Yeah, Instagram, because that seems to be where people are. And I post on Instagram now, and it updates my Facebook page. So I'm on both.
Right. Okay. Well, if you want to go follow along with Ray and everything that he's got going on, go find him on Instagram. Follow him there. It's been absolutely fascinating to have you on, Ray. I'm sure there's so much more I'd love to ask you. So at some point, maybe I'll have to try to see if I can steal a few more minutes of your time in the future and go through some more of these amazing expeditions that you have going on. But thanks so much for being on here.
Yeah, I'd love to. It'd be an honor to be on here again. I'm working on a book. So maybe after I get that book out, I can come back on. It'd be awesome.
Yes. Please do. That would be a great time to reconnect for sure. So.
All right. Right on. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks so much.